Ms. Magazine. The title of it is Voices of Ms, the Evolution of Feminism through Ms. Magazine. I'm going to turn over the floor to you right away.
Hello. So, as Dr. Penny just said, my research is titled Voices of Ms, the Evolution of Feminism through Ms. Magazine. For my project, I studied the feminist magazine titled Ms, which was in circulation from 1971 to 1989. For my research questions, I looked at how did Ms represent the evolution of feminism within the national movement, what were the inconsistencies within the content of Ms, and why were these contradictions so significant in gaining support for Ms and the feminist movement. For my sources, I looked at the issues of Ms. I read various mission statements and other documents, such as speeches and letters from the various feminist organizations at the time. I read books written by active feminists. I looked at the oral history from the founders of Ms regarding their project, and I also read various secondary sources. So for some background information, second wave feminism refers to the feminist movement after World War II. There were many strands of feminist thought within the national movement, very diverse and also very conflicting. For the state of literature for women at the time, it was very limiting. The major magazines that targeted women were Cosmopolitan, Vogue, Ladies' Home Journal, Family Circle, McCall's, and they focused on issues on domesticity, femininity, relationships with men. And when the feminist movement did get any attention in the media, it was portrayed in an accurate way a lot of times. It was very dramatic. If you've heard the term bra burners, it refers to the 1968 demonstration in front of the Miss America pageant in which no bras were burned, but I'm sure that made very entertaining headlines the next day. So feminists such as Gloria Steinem, Elizabeth Harris, Patricia Carbine, whom you can see up here, wanted to create a permanent form of feminist literature that could truly represent all voices of feminism and be a place where women could be heard. So in 1971, New York Magazine agreed to print an insert of the preview issue of Ms, which you can see up here. And the response was phenomenal. It truly popularized the concept of feminism within American culture. It reached a readership of 3 million people and became its own force within the movement. So for my research, I specifically looked at how Ms represented the evolution of feminist thought. So within the movement, you can see a trend from radical feminism to a more moderate feminism, which we know today as cultural feminism. And radical feminism is a very aggressive approach to challenging the male-dominated society. So it presented anything to do with femininity, domesticity. It was very anti-male. And people felt alienated by this because the definition of a feminist was so restricted. And so we saw a trend to a more moderate approach, which is cultural feminism. And that was about embracing and exploring all aspects of what it meant to be a woman, not worrying about if something seemed to portray women in a negative light or as insecure or inferior. If it had to do with being a woman, it was worth exploring and embracing. It was the idea that you did not have to change to see change. The other concept that I looked at was the importance of diversity within the magazine. And because the subject material was so diverse, in times the messages could be inconsistent. And although it received criticism at the time, that was ultimately so important to the magazine's success because it was able to reach such a wide variety of people, and people with all different opinions could relate to the magazine in some way. And because they were able to portray this cultural feminism, it created such a wide range of support because they looked at concepts not just about politics or economics, but they talked about domestic abuse, and they talked about rape, and they talked about communication, and beauty, and fashion. They talked about so many things, which was unique to feminist thought at the time, that it was able to really transform the movement. So as you can see here, Ms looked deep into the concept of body image and women's portrayal in the media. They criticized the objectification and sexualization of women's bodies within our culture. They would put photographs in their magazine of women's bodies that looked very different to the average model or actress you would see in other forms of literature. However, when they chose to print an issue entirely devoted to this concept, they chose a slender Caucasian woman to be on the cover. And many people criticized this, saying it was very inconsistent to try and change the concept of women in the media and then choose such a standard image on the cover of this issue. But Ms. stood by it, saying that they didn't want to choose someone of minority race in fear of sending a racist message, and they didn't want to put a heavier woman on the cover in fear of sending the message that only heavier women could have body issues. And people supported it and criticized it, but ultimately allowed for so many people to relate and participate in the magazine. At the end of each Ms. Magazine, there was something called a no comment section, where readers could send in sexist ads that they saw in other magazines or newspapers. And Ms. denounced all of these ads that had sometimes very obvious and sometimes just undertones of inequality. However, if you look up here, the ad titled, "A Woman's Work Was Never Done," a woman doing paperwork on a plane with a man fast asleep beside her. And if the gender roles were switched, this would definitely be an ad that would have come into question from Ms. They would have absolutely seen this as inequality within the ad, yet they used it themselves. Also, they were very dedicated to the concept of health and educating women on their bodies. And people were confused as to why most of the advertisements came from cigarette and alcohol ads. They thought it was contradictory that you would try to promote healthy life for women, yet promote such harmful products. But again, Ms. stood by it and said it's very known that cigarettes are bad for you, therefore women can make the decision themselves, which you can see in this ad. And again, people agreed and disagreed with it, but ultimately, because they were so open to criticism and all views, they created an environment that was so open and all-encompassing to so many forms of feminism. And in conclusion, their dedication to promoting this concept of cultural feminism, which was so diverse and therefore at times inconsistent, they allowed for all women to participate in, and even men and women to relate to the magazine in some way. And it became the most successful feminist magazine of all time by truly refusing to define what a feminist is.